Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. Gotta correct a bonehead mistake from last week. I had said that X stations are not compatible with 1001 series PlayStations, and I was thinking of the PS1 digital. And I'm not, at this point, I'm not even 100% sure what's compatible with what anymore. I just usually suggest the 5501s for North America because those are compatible with both. And I know for a fact those are because I own a couple of them at the moment. One's going to a friend. So, yeah, sorry for the mistake, but I'm pretty positive I said then, and I always say, just make sure to double check these things. There are so many acronyms and there are so many model numbers in retro gaming. And not only that, but even behind the scenes with the development stuff, there's so many model numbers and acronyms and things like that. So, 1001, 5501, there's just so much it's very easy to get stuff wrong. So my apologies for that. Hopefully I didn't skew anybody's purchase based on that advice, but no matter what, always just double check the installation guides. And also, even when I get stuff right, it's based on the time that I'm recording these. So, there's been, a ton of times where I said, no, this is not compatible. And then there's been an update and 3 months later it was. So if you happen to catch the video, at the wrong time, you technically would have gotten wrong info. So no matter what, always double check stuff. But I do try my absolute best to get everything right. And also keep in mind that with these Q&As, I think it's so much more genuine when I do them in real time. I often flub an answer and have to answer 2 or 3 times to get it right, but it's still in the moment. I don't plan these out. And I feel like it's a much more genuine and honest response. But, if you'd like the other way, I could try to approach these differently. Definitely let me know in the comments what you prefer. But anyway, let's jump in. First up, over on Floatplane, Rolf said that they just got an HDMI to component video adapter and tested it out on their Sony consumer-grade TV. There's 2 examples here. One that's comparing component video off of a Wii that looks pretty good, and another one that's using their HDMI to component adapter, and it looks like there's some bends at the top of the screen. Some distortion if you're listening audio only, where the checkerboard pattern, grid pattern, however you want to call it, is bending up at the top. And they said, any ideas what might be causing that? They're using an RTX 3080, and they also haven't had any luck with 480i. Honestly, this is a rough one, and I've had really, really bad luck going from PCs with NVIDIA graphics cards to CRTs. I've worked with friends on this, and not only that, I've worked with friends where we're, FaceTiming, Skyping, whatever, and we have very similar setups, and we're doing the same thing, and theirs is working perfect, and mine isn't working at all. So that's an excellent question, and I'm not really sure. The only other thing I would try is try any other source device for HDMI, if possible. I know it's kind of rough, but try any other HDMI source to see if it's the converter. Because one issue I had is the Amazon link that I always leave up of these HDMI to component video converters. Out of every 100 messages I get from people saying they bought it and it's good, one, they said they had problems. They opened it up and it wasn't the same chip as the one that I have. So, that is kind of a downside of getting these cheap generic adapters, is you never really know what chip they're using, what model revision. So it could be the HDMI converter, and you're going to want to check that out with a different source. Get a different brand if possible. If that's the case, they're cheap enough where if you feel like this is a tool that you would really rely on, getting a second's never a bad thing, especially considering if you go from an AliExpress link, it's like $6 or something like that. So, if there were ever a time to waste money on a second adapter, I feel like $6 is probably a good way to go about it. Other than that, try a different video card, mess with any different settings. And 480i is a little tricky too, because I think a lot of video cards don't know how to do interlaced sources. So, worst comes to worst, you can get an arcade VGA card, or you could try to get a downscaler like the GBS control software, and then you would just need, that's another thing that might work, is just going HDMI to component video, outputting 480p, and then doing component video in to component video out of the GBS control. There's a lot of things that could factor into this, though. So if anybody else is watching and they've seen those bends or anything like that, please chime in. But this is kind of a tricky one because it could be so many things down the line. And also, thanks for the kind words. You said, hope my small contributions can help. Absolutely. Any contribution is massively appreciated. And it's, with respect, it's the quantity that makes the difference. So, if you're throwing $1 a month, that's amazing. I still appreciate it so much. Tell some friends if you could, though. I would like to keep this going, and I really wish I could have like a camera floating above my desk so you all could see the amazing things that I get to be a part of. Most of the time it's just middlemaning. You're like, oh well, that's amazing, but you need to work with this person and then have that person manufacture it and ask this person for help. But there's some really cool stuff coming out in the next year or so, and I'm just very, very lucky to be a part of it. I guess I keep repeating words, meaning, to accentuate stuff. I don't know. Thank you for letting me be a part of all of this very cool stuff. Over to Patreon, there were a few people that had some statements that weren't questions, and some people also talking about the X-Station mistake, so I'll skip over those politely. I don't mean to blow you all off, but it just didn't seem to require any response. But the first one that does, Kurt Bunker wants to know if I know of any shops doing mods or taking pre-orders for the PS1 Mode upgrade. It looks to be the same type of mod as the X-Station, so I would contact those. And respectfully, figure out which is the best option for you, because I believe the mode works on only the same amount of, or the same types of consoles as the X-Station. Double check me. I don't want to make that mistake again. But it's so expensive, all depending on what storage you're using. So, if you, Kurt, said, oh, I want the entire PS1 library of US, Japan, and Europe all on one hard drive, then yeah, actually the mode is much cheaper. You can get a 2 terabyte mechanical hard drive for a heck of a lot cheaper than you can a 1 or 2 terabyte micro SD card. But if you're the type of person that says, I want to have 64 gig SD card or micro SD, load up my favorite games, and then I'll just download or rip any of the other ones that I need, the X-Station is insanely cheaper. So, I like both. I would not insult either product. The mode is so much more expensive that I definitely want to make sure people take the whole thing into consideration when they're purchasing. And there's SD mounts are going to be available for both. So I have the one for the X-Station where that Greg from Laser Bear made. That it's a really nice insert that makes the console feel stock. So there's going to be options for both. I would just keep in mind the total setup and pick the one that's the least expensive overall. Oliver Clare says they're getting a G-Comp switch and they're thinking of picking up a few wall mount brackets from Laser Bear, but they're a little worried that if they fill up their switch with heavy HD Retrovision component cables and mount it on a wall, the weight of the cables might drag down and damage the component connections on the switch. Having used the G-Comp switch for a while, do you think this could ever be a problem? That absolutely could be a problem with any switch and any connector, but whenever you're in a situation like that, cable management will take care of all of it. I think anybody that's ever done networking in IT is probably smiling right now because they're thinking of exactly the same scenario in which, you put 24 or 48 network connections into a switch, and then if you just let them hang, that'll eventually cause some issues. But if you run them alongside and you have some cable management where maybe they're putting pressure on cable mounts that are also on the wall, then you're not going to have any issue with your switch. So I would just make sure to run them I would either run them to the side and have some loops that they go through or on top of, and that way the weight is put on those brackets and not the switch. Or if you're going to run them below, run them like down and around another thing for the same reason. So that way the pressure is being put on that. And it's the same thing with the Scart coupler, which I don't know why that's not out yet. No disrespect to anybody involved. It's the things going on in the world that delayed it, not anybody in particular. But it's the same thing with that. If you plug that Scart coupler into your G-Scart and you plug your OSSC on top and you have your OSSC loaded with cables and everything's everything's pulling off on one side, then you're going to damage the switch. But if you have everything nice and run so there's no pressure being put on it, then there's no issue whatsoever. So it's all about good cable management, and unfortunately there's no way for it to look good. Unless you think, depending on the situation, if it's an office and you have these very awesome component video cables run around, I'm sure there's some creative people that could make it look like artwork. But if you're trying to hide it behind your desk, I think I would just try to arrange it in a way where it's the least offensive looking and just make sure that the cables are braced onto the wall and not onto the switch. Doomleg had a bunch of questions. I'm going to try to answer them all in one, but I might have to separate it. So let's see if I could try my best. First, it looks like you're asking a question about what revision of Mr.'s I/O board is compatible with the SNAC, and does the SNAC adapter make that much of a difference? So couple of things. First of all, SNAC is direct serial from controllers. So what it's essentially doing is putting your controller input directly into the FPGA pins and letting the FPGA convert the inputs. I know I'm oversimplifying. Every time I do that, the Mr. team probably wants to jump through the computer and backhand me, but it's a decent way to visualize it. The chip on the DE10 itself is what's doing the controller conversion, and it essentially turns the input into a real input of that console. So much like if you were to try to use a Genesis controller on a Super Nintendo, if you used a Genesis SNAC adapter on the Super Nintendo core, it wouldn't work at all. Now, as for what I/O is compatible with which SNAC, I would just go to Mr. Add-ons and either purchase the right one or ask if the one that you've purchased is the right one. I go through them for a lot of I think pretty much all of my Mr. stuff. There's some new things coming out that other people are making different versions of, and there's no right or wrong. There's, just whatever you prefer, but MrAddons.com is definitely a good place to start at the moment for that. So I guess I would just leave that up to them and figure out the revisions. I don't remember off the top of my head which Rev I had, but I do know that I had the oldest Rev IO board out there, and mine worked. So, and from my experience, does using SNAC make that much of a difference? Well, it's required for light guns. Blister supposedly works with it, but I've had some issues with that. But I also had a beta edition of the Blister board, so I don't know what had to do with which issue. SNAC seems to work perfect on NES, I believe Super Nintendo and Genesis. I haven't tried Master System yet, but I should, because Safari Hunt's a fun game, and there's a few others on there that are kind of neat. So for light guns, yeah, it's kind of required. As for other things, I've tried different controller adapters that were so fast that I couldn't tell a difference at all. The ones... I forgot who originally designed them. Damon Byte is currently selling them, but a few other stores are going to as well. It's open source. I think those were tested at less than a millisecond of latency, which is impossible for anybody to detect. I don't care. You very often hear certain communities talk about any lag at all will affect it. Less than 1 millisecond of controller lag. It should be, for gaming purposes, considered 0. For light guns, it's down, you have to sync everything up. That's different. But for actually playing a game, so, as long as you get a good controller adapter, and I believe the these USB controllers, the RetroBit ones, I think these were tested at about a millisecond either. So if you don't mind these new RetroBit, sorry, I don't know why I blanked on that. If you like the new style of them, that should be a perfectly good experience without any extra adapter, and they're fairly cheap too. So, my general opinion on that would be, if you're into light guns, get it, and you're playing on a CRT, they're not going to miraculously work on a flat panel. Or if you're just a hardcore gamer that wants the least amount of difference from the original, even if you know that you can't tell the difference, which is definitely me. Like, if I had a choice, I would use SNAC just because. I would definitely pick it. Next, Sega Sonic fans, Unigen converter and a PC Engine adapter is still the only zero-lag wireless controller solution to use with a PC Engine because it enables using a Genesis controller. Just make sure when you say things like zero lag that you have it in context. The converter itself might not add any lag, but when you say wireless controller solution, the wireless controller is always going to have some kind of variable latency. But anyway, continuing with your question, you said it works great with the 8-bit DO controller, but has issues with the joys. Any idea why the adapter would read the inputs differently? No clue, honestly. Sorry about that. I would talk to Sega Sonic Fan about that one. Any idea if there are any upcoming 2.4 gig wireless controllers for the PC Engine, or is there not much of a demand? I don't know. I thought 8-bit DO might have done something like create a different retro receiver for theirs, but I certainly haven't heard anything about it. You said using the Bluetooth ones gets very frustrating. The 8-bit DO controllers are great for the most part, but they have a D-pad issue, specifically the SNES and NES ones, where down registers every now and then when you press left or right. I didn't hear about that one, but whenever I have those controllers, they either work perfect or they have some issue, and then I either get rid of it and get another one, or and then the new one doesn't have the issue. So anyway, I tried not to ramble. There was a whole bunch of questions jammed in there, so I tried to do my best to answer them all for you. And if you need anything else, let me know. Hopefully I did that all right. Mark Main said that they have a PVM that only has SVideo input, and we're looking to get one of those Scart to SVideo converters from Ashen, the same person that makes that pretty awesome Switch that I reviewed a while back, and wants to know if it's compatible with the 3D glasses and the light gun. And yes it is. Let's see if I'm positive this isn't going to show up on camera. However, even with my busted ass old SMS gun, it works. Yeah. Even with this beat-ass old gun, it still seems to work fine. So I'm going to go with yes. And just for the record, I did try it directly Scart in and directly Composite in on the same monitor. And this was equally as flaky on both. It wasn't any better or worse. So absolutely, I would say give it a try. It should be fine. And also, I hope I was in the right place, because I can't really see with those glasses on when it's powered on. Next, Kevin Willingham wanted to know what I thought is causing the video issues in the HDMI modded NES James is using for the AVGN Legend of Cage video. I spoke to Mike about this a little bit, and I don't think it's an HDMI modded NES. I think it's an RGB modded NES going through a FrameMeister, but I could have misunderstood. I offered my help to go out and tweak whatever needs to be tweaked. My help meaning in setup and in referring to some of the best modders on the planet. While I have and I could do HDMI and RGB mods on the NES, I would, for something that's going to be used for videos that millions of people would be seeing, I would really prefer to have the best people do it, not me. So I offered my help. Hopefully they'll accept it, and I will absolutely get it to the right people. And hopefully we could even do a video talking about exactly what it was and how it was fixed. Blue Rigel 81 said they heard me say it was unsafe to use a Y cable to split analog video from a console. They have a cheap composite switch box they bought off of Amazon that has 2 AV output ports. Does something like that have the same issue if both outputs are used, or is the issue specific to Y cables? Good question, and to be very clear about what I said, I was using Y cable both as a metaphor and literally. So anytime you have a signal that's just tied to 2 outputs, whether it's literally in a Y cable or whether it's, circuits on a circuit board, it's not very good at all. However, if you have a powered AV box, so you have to plug it into a wall, I'm pretty positive they don't make any that without some kind of power circuit that could do this. So if it's powered and it has the circuitry, so basically a mini signal distribution amplifier chip built right onto the board, then it should absolutely be safe. And those things did get pretty popular after a while, because just like everything else, when those things first were released, they were expensive, but after a while they started making the video amp chips cheap enough so you can get a $20 one at Radio Shack back in the day that would work with 2 outputs at the same time. So any YCable or YCable-like scenario, no, it is bad, but anytime you plug it into a powered device that has the circuitry to output to multiple outputs, then it should be safe. Charles Madeir was following up on the audio issue we talked about a few times that they were having using the Super NT and a full mixing setup that they were using. And it looks like when they went from one of their other audio inputs into the mixer with USB audio, there was a problem. And now that they've used SPDIF digital audio for both, the problem went away. So I still don't have the slightest clue what that issue could possibly be. But if I'm even understanding the problem correctly, it could just come down to using line level audio with signal and ground versus optical audio, which is a beam of light, which is anytime you have signal and ground, there's always a chance of adding some kind of interference somewhere. But I still don't quite understand that whole where that problem could have come from and why that's the solution. But, if it works, congrats, and don't question it. Just keep going. Clark Gibson said they have a GDMU installed in their Dreamcast and never liked the fact that the stock PSU runs hot without a resistor jammed between the pins. Are there any issues they need to be aware of if they install one of the newly developed PSU solutions with the GDMU? So there's a lot to talk about here. I'll just answer your question quickly and then kind of go back into it. You have to make sure you have a good quality replacement PSU, because if you don't, at best you might get some interference across the screen even with a digital mod, and at worst you could just slowly be killing your Dreamcast. So the way I approach this is, if you have an original Dreamcast in its original region, meaning you don't need to change the power at all, I would always recommend just recapping it and then putting that resistor in there, and you're done. You don't have anything to worry about. You could add some solder. You could solder the resistor to the bottom so you're not actually jamming it in. Although, keep in mind that whoever gets it after you might not know that it's there, so that's just something to think about. But I wouldn't worry about that at all. And I also wouldn't worry about, some people say that these new PSU replacements cool the console down. I wouldn't worry about that either, because don't forget that just because something runs hot doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. So, if something is sitting at 60°C, during normal use, but that's the temperature that it was totally designed to run in, you might get some more longevity after it if it's cooler, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. You're not overheating it. However, if you want to do the replacement PSUs, the number one reason I would understand for doing something like that is a situation I'm helping a friend with now, in that they want NTSC consoles, but they live in a different region with a different power system. And you can't just get a triad for these because it's an internal power supply. So for the Dreamcast, I made sure to get the converter power board that Christoph, one of the designers of the DC Digital, made. Excuse me. And that utilizes a Pico PSU. However, 8-Bit Mods, where I got it from, not only do they sell Christoph's design, they also sell the Pico PSU that is confirmed to be a quality design. And that's a big problem, because you could get expensive Pico PSUs from reputable resellers on Amazon and Newegg and stuff that are garbage. I bought a couple of years ago to test with Super Guns, and I remember showing Renee pictures of both. I bought 2 different ones from 2 different bigger stores with good reviews, and I think Renee told me to throw one of them right in the garbage. She said, don't even power it on, just forget about it, it's total junk. And the other one was meh. So that's the only other thing you got to be careful with. So if you insist upon swapping out your PSU with a new one, the only store I know that sells both Christoph's design and the Pico PSU is 8-Bit Mods. Somebody please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on this one. But I think Greg might sell them as well, but I don't think Laser Bear sells the Pico PSU with it. So you would have to find a good reputable source for those. But that would be how you go about doing it. And this way, anybody internationally can just use one of these on the inside and then get a good Triad PSU on the outside and not have to worry about it. Or any of good confirmed brands. EDAC's another good one. There's a couple of them out there. So, it's probably a longer answer than you wanted, but I really would stick with the original unless you need to change it out. Just definitely replace the capacitors in it. Or if you would, if you really just want a brand new one, I would get the one that Christoph designed, and I would get a good quality Pico PSU, and then find a good quality AC to DC converter to go into that. So it's way more complicated than it sounds, but hopefully you'll be able to figure it out. Allie Matthews said they're trying to set up a basic stream setup for their Nintendo 64. Both their N64s are RGB modded, and they plan on using them on a PVM while streaming. SVideo is good enough quality, so they were going to get one of those IO Data $55 SVideo cards, SVideo capture cards that are USB based, and they don't really want to bother with the data path, which I totally understand. And they want to know if there's a custom cable or splitter they could use to get both SVideo and RGB from one N64. So I think it was Mobius Strip Tech designed a while back a breakout board that I used for demos at trade shows and expos and stuff that plugs into the back of an N64 or Super Nintendo and breaks out Composite, SVideo, as well as a bunch of RCA jacks for RGBS, which you could then just use basic RCA cables, even like the HD Retrovision RCA to RCAs, they're pretty cheap, and then basic BNC connectors. So then you could plug that directly into your PVM and the SVideo directly into the capture card. I don't believe he sells those. I think you might have to make your own, but if you were looking for a soldering project, that's about as easy as it gets because they're all fairly large components on there. So it might actually be kind of a fun thing. And then you just have to make sure to get some standoffs to take the pressure off and all that. So you're not putting pressure on the input port of your N64. The other thing that you could do is you could do RGB into your PVM and then use the BNC outputs to go to some other solution. Now, you said you want to specifically use a USB solution, so that would mean that you would have to get both a capture card and some kind of scaler. So you could fairly easily get like a BNC to Scart cable with a switch in it. Actually, I think I still have one right here. Yeah. You can get a Scart cable that has BNC on one end, so these would go to the outputs of your PVM, and then this just selects the sync direction, and that way you could go right into an OSSC or a RetroTink 2X Scart, and then into one of those. Actually, if you get the RetroTink 2X Scart, you might even be able to get one of those $20 capture cards. So I would just kind of step back overall and think, what's the easiest and most cost-effective for your solution, and what would you use on other solutions? So having a breakout board that breaks out RGB, Composite, and SVideo, as well as having an SVideo capture card sounds really cool, but what's the total cost and time versus just going all RGB and then getting a super cheap capture card, or even one of those blue ones that Voltar found last year or something like that, which you can get those on AliExpress pretty cheap. So I would kind of think about the whole total setup and see what's the most cost effective for you. And if it does come down to just using the exact thing that you described, I would try to find that open source board somewhere. I'm pretty sure it's linked on RetroRGB, and if not, I'll try to find a link and drop it in for you as well. But I would really think more about this as a complete and total solution. And how does your setup work? Are the outputs of your PVM in good shape? I've seen a few where, for whatever reason, the red output didn't work. I don't know why, but I've seen that on a couple of PVMs. Maybe they just age over the years or something, but I would just kind of check everything out and see what fits your whole setup the best. Phil Welker said, in my LG TV video, I used a VGA to composite converter. Can I get a link for that? That is the LinuxBot 3000 converter I've talked about a few times on these Q&As. And here's the whole setup, which I love. So I have the Time Sleuth going into a brand new adapter I found that is VGA or HDMI to VGA. And this adapter does not have audio, but it's powered directly from the Time Sleuth through the HDMI port, and it worked perfect for the Time Sleuth, which is, I don't know if I would recommend this for something like the Mister because there's no audio on it, but for just this, it is absolutely perfect. And then from there, I just used a basic plug-to-plug VGA dongle and into the LinuxBot 3000 converter, which I believe takes either RGBS or RGB HV, and then converts that to either SVideo or Composite video. Now, this is the converter I've talked about a few times, and much like the one from Ashen, Composite video doesn't always work right. Because of the colors that go through it. It's a very long explanation in that I don't think any of these converters will work correctly. However, SVideo does. So that's why, with the 3D and light gun example from before, that's why I showed the other converter, and that does seem to work fine. However, the Time Sleuth, that's only black and white, so that does not apply here, and this worked perfect for lag testing composite video input. So that's kind of a new addition to my lag testing setup. I really like that cool little chain of converters. And before I did that video, I set up a consumer grade TV and my PVM, and I tested it, and I got all zeros for milliseconds. So it really is a safe setup to use if you ever need to lag test composite video on anything. Ooh, one more thing for Phil, though. You have to send this converter a 15 kilohertz signal. You have to send all of these either 240p or 480i. This will not downscale at all. This will not take VGA 640 by 480. This only takes 15 kilohertz signals, and that's why I have the Time Sleuth. Two of the settings on my Time Sleuth are 240p and 480i, which is what I used to test in the video. Two questions from Hector Santana. First, can I explain why the scanline filter on the RetroTink multi-format doesn't work with the M Classic? And why didn't the M Classic just upscale the scanlines? I don't know. That's kind of a rough one, but I do know that Scanlines mess with a lot of different devices, capture cards, scalers, because you're essentially sending just blank black lines across the screen, and a lot of scalers just don't know how to interpret that. So I can't give an exact answer for YCable. You would have to ask them. I don't think they're going to answer. They don't usually, but I wouldn't expect Scanlines to scale properly through any scaler. Also, do I have any recommendations on how to get scanlines while using these two together? I got a scanline generator and found that all it does is add stripes to the image. It worked as it should when I chained it in after the M Classic, but again, no scanlines, just stripes. I do not know of a good scanline generator for HDMI sources. There is one on eBay and I think Amazon that people keep bringing up whenever I say that, but that converts from digital to analog back to digital, and it's exactly as you said. It just adds stripes. It does not figure out what the signal is and insert scan lines in the correct spots. So no, there is nothing at the moment. I do believe there's got to be somebody working on scalers that have HDMI inputs for gaming. And if these things do exist or come to fruition in the next year or two, I cannot imagine them not adding scan lines to it. So at the moment, I would just say, unfortunately, there's nothing you could do and kind of wait and see. And also, I don't know if you would really want scan lines if you're softening it with the YCable or M Classic. It might not really give the effect that you're looking for. So, it's not, if there was ever a feature to miss out on, then I think this would be okay. And also, thank you very much for your kind words. Zabernaki said they have a friend that's moving to Australia, and they were going to give them their Sega Genesis version 2 with triple bypass installed and a set of HD Retrovision component cables. They're guessing the constraint for him would be that he could only play NTSC games and he'll need a power converter. Aside from that, I'm wondering if there'll be any other compatibility issues they should be aware of before sending him off. Go to Firebrand X's website, look at the power supply triads, and get the international one from DigiKey, and that will completely solve the power issue. If it's a Genesis 2, I think I can't remember if the one Firebrand X picked out for Genesis 2 requires a pigtail or not, but he did list all of those things. So I would take care of that for power. And yeah, I would say that he would only be able to play NTSC games. So if he gets any PAL games out there, he would have to get a region converter. But, this is, at that point, what's cheaper? Because with the Sega Genesis, I would imagine that just picking up one locally that plays PAL, you could use the same power supply on both. Now you could have both PAL and NTSC. And yeah, one is going to look and sound a heck of a lot better than the other, but, maybe that's part of the original experience then. But for me personally, the fact that you could still get a Genesis for $30 versus the mod itself is probably that much money, plus paying somebody to install it, I would get a PAL Genesis if they needed a second. But just my opinion. So get the Triad international power supply, and if you want, add the region mod to it as well. Firebrand X wants to know what I think of using sandpaper to clean your video game cartridges. I know what you're doing here, Firebrand X. So I'm going to answer this very carefully. There are only two things that you should use to clean your cartridge 99.9% of the time. In this exact order, take isopropyl and, if possible, open the cartridge. If not, that's fine. I know some of them are a giant pain to open, but if it's something super easy like an NES, Super Nintendo, or Genesis shell, pop that open, take a Q-tip, cotton, anything soft, and add some isopropyl. Rubbing alcohol will do just fine. Industrial grade isopropyl is even better. And rub down the contacts. And very often you'll get like a black sooty thing coming off of the contacts. Then, after you've cleaned it, you might have to clean it a couple times if it's really dirty. Use a pink pencil eraser. Do not use one that's attached to a pencil, because if you go down too far, you can get to the metal that's holding it on. Use just one of these rectangular pink pencil erasers and go back and forth, up and down, back and forth, circles, whatever. Go around the contacts with this. And put some pressure, but don't try to push through the cartridge. Just put some pressure on it. And most importantly, from this point on, do not touch the contacts with your fingers, because the oils and impurities on your fingers will get on it. So hold it from the sides, wipe it off pretty good. Then after you're done, wipe that down, and then I usually take isopropyl again, mostly just to get any leftover rubber shavings off, but just as kind of a, one more once over. And by the way, I don't think there's any issue whatsoever if a couple little bits of rubber get into your cartridge slot. Just hit it with compressed air or something. It's not like it'll short out, but I like to be thorough. And that's it. That's all you would need. If that doesn't clean your cartridge, then you need to think, or if that doesn't fix your cartridge, you need to think about where you want to go from here. Is there rust or something on it? Is there other damage? Is it an expensive cart? Is it one that you want to preserve but you're not going to use because you could play the ROM cart? And then from there, you want to decide where you want to go with it. Now, I know the internet gets in an uproar every time anybody brings up any of these other methods, but there is a time and a place where you might find a cartridge with rust or something on it where you would want to use something abrasive to clean that. But you also have to understand that doing so removes any layers of protection that are over it, and depending on what you use to clean it, sandpaper leaving its gritty little sand bits on it, metal polish using its microscopic little gritty sand bits on it, that could be transferred to your cartridge slot and then therefore every other cartridge you put in. So you would need to know exactly what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, what's going to happen afterwards, and what's the purpose anyway? Are you getting rid of rust so it doesn't spread? Are you just trying to make a cart work? And if that's the case, is it even worth it? Do you want to just leave it alone and play it from a ROM cart? So While I should certainly have an updated video on cleaning cartridges, I actually was planning on doing one a few years ago, but then that one kind of crappy one came out and everybody talked about it, and I didn't want any part of that drama because that's not the kind of drama that I enjoy at all. The kind of drama I enjoy is when my friends make fun of me when we're on a podcast, not stuff like that. So, yeah, I understand why you asked that question, and I hope my answer was as politically correct and fair as well as factually good as it possibly could have been. Kieran O'Donnell has a couple of questions on N64 mods, but it looks like they're all PAL-related questions, and I have very little experience with PAL N64. I have almost no experience with that, and much less experience with PAL from other consoles as well, because it's pretty costly to import them, and then I have to find a place to put them. I live in a shoebox, basically, so it's basically laziness and cost. It's hard to get these things, find a place to store them, and then be able to do all this extra testing. So I apologize in advance, but let me do my best. They have a PAL N64, and N64 games and PAL nearly all run slow to hit 50 Hz. The EverDrive states it's region free, but I assume NTSC games will still run slow on the 50 Hz console. I can't remember ever trying that specifically, but I do believe that you are correct, but I could be wrong on that one. Then they heard about the Ultra PIF that they think will let the N64 run at both speeds, but can't find any reviews. Have you heard any feedback? I did talk to at least one person that installed it that said it works exactly as advertised, basically run either game at either speed type of thing. And finally, my N64 is modded with Tim Worthington's RGB board. Now, I can get my hands on NTSC RGB cables easier than PAL ones at the moment, so if I leave the RGB board in the NTSC configuration, is it safe to use the NTSC RGB Scart cable over a PAL one? If you have installed it exactly like Tim said, and if you have it in the NTSC configuration, yes. However, Retro Gaming Cables has that universal cable that should just work on everything. So if you wanted to be safe, I would just get that one and not even really worry about it. It uses composite video as sync, but it also has a circuit right in the right on the console side of things. So it should be identical in performance. So the answer to that final question is yeah, I think, but if you just want to get the one from Retro Gaming Cables, you should just be able to use it on everything. So I guess I would kind of think about your total setup and see where that's at. And just check the documentation from Tim, check on the Retro Gaming Cables website, and kind of see how that affects your entire setup. Clint Collage says, as prices on CRT PVMs have been rising, I've been noticing prices on LCD and even OLED PVMs, professional video monitors, have been dropping. Just checking, do you know of anyone who has done any lag tests on these? I imagine since they are intended to get the creator's intent without all of the consumer TV enhancements, it could be possible that these may be low lag. If so, do you think these would be a good solution to look at paired with an open source scan converter? I'm wondering if what they lack in size they would make up for in quality, similar to in the CRT realm. It's an excellent question, and I have never used a professional video LCD or OLED monitor, only CRTs. However, with that new LG CX series OLED out there, that's pretty impressive. And depending on when you find them, the 48-inch and the 55-inch are similarly priced. So it's, you can get yourself a decent-sized TV with an incredibly low lag that has a couple of modes. You could try that black frame insertion, the BFI mode on there too. So I don't know if any of the enhancements of these professional monitors would really bleed through for modern gaming. They could. I have no clue. So if anybody out there knows of a site where people test these, I know Mike brought up artings.com, but I'm pretty sure they only test consumer grade TVs. So I guess I would kind of ask around, but I don't know of any resource like that. And I'm not sure of any place that would want to spend 15, 20 grand on those monitors in order to really test them and see for video game use, when you can get for $1,500 or less a very, very good low lag OLED that's compatible with the OSSC. So I would love to know the answer to that question myself, but I don't have any resource for it. Charles Madeir recently discovered that the NT Mini is capable of directly playing NSF files as kind of a NES music sound file. So actually, I believe Kevin Horton, Kevtris, the guy who designed the board and all the FPGA cores for the analog products up till now, I think he was the one that even invented the NSF file. So that would be a big yes. Check out the interviews I did with him for more info on that, by the way. So to continue your question, this kind of got me thinking it could be a very fun side project to turn my NT Mini Noir into sort of a record player almost using this capability. And so my main question is, I'm wondering if you know of a similar capability being available for the Mega SG or SNES Super NT. It'd be very cool for physical retro consoles to also function as a music machine of sorts. So that already exists. There are already SNES and Genesis sound files. There are musicians like Remute, who I'm a giant fan of, who did original music on original Genesis and Super Nintendo carts. Memblers just the other day posted a Super Nintendo audio version of one of my favorite songs, coincidentally, from the band Amorphous. I don't know if there's anybody out there that listens to that kind of music too, but so that is absolutely already available. And in fact, when Christoph was here, I believe I played the Remute album through a triple bypassed Genesis on my stereo and stuff like that. So it is, if you want to get messing into the audiophile side of things, you could have some fun with this. And it's kind of just like RGB in that you could do some fun things where you could get a bunch of your friends together and half of them will not be able to tell the difference in how you're listening to the music, and the other half might be able to appreciate all analog versus digital versus a digital recording of an analog, and all of that crazy audiophile-esque stuff. So I would just do some research because I think it's already all out there for all of these things, and chiptunes musicians are kind of a big thing as well. So I would just look a little bit more into that. But yeah, you could absolutely do things like this. And I'm pretty sure there are packages out there too that have just the audio from games as files that are playable on original hardware, which might also kind of be fun. Jason Guffey wanted to follow up with the conversation from last week about SVideo converters. It looks like they found the Linux bot one on eBay, this one, and ordered the GBS control, but wanted to know the AshenWorks one. So that's this one. That's the one I just demoed with the 3D adapter, and I'll be doing a very quick post on social media about this, I think. I figured I already have all the equipment out, so let me take 2 minutes just to slap something together for everybody. But the only reason I haven't done a full review of this, I did write about it on the website, I believe. The only reason is the same reason I keep talking about, in that when you go from RGB to SVideo, it's fine, but RGB to Composite, there could be issues. And once again, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but that is not the fault of any of these specific converters. It's just kind of the way the signals are, and none of them, at least up till now, none of them has done to Composite video right in all scenarios. Some work, some don't, and all that stuff. So yeah, that's it. It's a very cool device. It's got RGB from either regular Scart or JP21, and it outputs, or you could even do input from direct, any of these inputs as well, and it outputs to both, two Composite and SVideo outs. I think I would have preferred the dual output to be one set of Composite SVideo and audio and another RGB output, but whatever, it's still an awesome device. And it's got a little power, like a brightness dial here, but this drops the brightness, not raises it. So it's not like on some of the other stuff where you could hurt your equipment if you pump too much voltage. All the way up is the normal setting on this. So it's perfectly safe to mess with, and it's got a PAL and NTSC switch on it too. So it's really just about your needs. If you need RGB from either regular Scart or JP21 to two SVideo outputs compatible with NTSC and PAL, or inputting RGB through VGA, RGBHV, or RGBS, or individually through RCA jacks, then this is absolutely the device for you. Whereas if you just need, RGBS through a D sub to SVideo, the Linux bot might be a little bit easier. Finally, not really a question, but kind of a funny thought. Trying to get a console modded these days feels like trying to track down any of these new electronics before the scalpers get them. With everyone stuck at home and retro upgrades in such high demand, I can't imagine there's any way for guys like Jose and Voltar to keep up with the demands of the time. No, that's in fact that is a pretty big issue, and everybody I know that's a good modder is beyond swamped. And it's kind of rough too, because everybody that wants to start modding that's good at it tries to get their name out there, and then as soon as they do, then they're just inundated with a million things to do, and it's easy to burn out on this stuff, so it is kind of rough. I caught Voltar's stream the other night, and he had lots of nice things to say about you. I can only imagine. I know this is childish, and I know I should not say this because I'm positive it's just going to end up in more trolling, but it always makes me smile when I hear Voltar tease me. Sometimes he goes too far, and sometimes often he says stuff that people might not even realize is a joke, but it always warms my heart. And I know that's just me being an immature child, but I can't help it. I really laugh at it. It also just blows my mind how many projects you guys all have your hands in at once. So just wanted to say bravo and thanks. Give me that damn wiki. Well, thanks for your kind thoughts. I love it, but holy crap, is it overwhelming sometimes. And sometimes it's a matter of just trying to figure out deadlines. So like I always get the podcast out on Wednesdays. I always get these out by Friday night. And I try to do about a post a day, and I try to do another video a week, but it's always a trade-off. It's like, do I stop what I'm doing to write some articles, but then is a developer waiting for me and they can't finish their project until I give them my test results, or there's a new project out, but somebody might be halfway there and they need to finish it, and I happen to have already had experience in the other thing. So the hardest thing is balancing time for me, because I would very selfishly like to work on whatever I feel like working on in the moment. I know how ridiculous and selfish that sounds, but that is just the truth. I mean, I'm only human. So I try to have a healthy balance. I try not to leave anybody hanging. And my only two rules that I set for myself is never miss either of the weekly videos, the podcast or the Q&As. Cause I feel like especially people that support on the support services, that's kind of one of the main reasons too, is like, hey, all this other stuff's cool, but give me the weekly podcast and the Q&As are fun. So yeah, it's always a rough one. And I know Voltar's the same way, because he also has a million projects that he hasn't finished, some of which include consoles that I've mailed him like 5 years ago that I'll probably never see again. So we're all kind of in the middle of a bunch of stuff, and hopefully we'll have time to get the most important stuff out there for everybody. But thanks again for the kind words, and good luck trying to find a modder. And if it's anything beginner to intermediate and you think you're going to do more than one, maybe consider trying it yourself. Expert stuff, respectfully, don't bother. Unless you have experience with some of this crazy stuff, you'll probably just end up breaking it. I am not insulting you. I'm just saying I definitely did, and most people that try do. It's a lot of times when you get to the really high level stuff, it's more of an art form than anything else, Like Michael Jordan could walk you through every single step of what it takes to dunk the way he does, but not everybody can dunk. And that's just kind of life. So, if it's something that you think you might want to do for fun, go for it, but keep looking for modders for the really hard stuff, like the PS1 digital, the DC digital, Ultra HDMI, if you could ever find them, and all that stuff. Well, that's it for this week. Kind of a longer one, I guess, but I really don't care if it's long or short. I just enjoy doing them, and I always try to just answer with as much as I think it takes to get the right answer out. I'm sure I always ramble a little too much, but whatever. Anyway, as always, thank you so much to everybody that participates these, and especially thank you to everybody that supports on services like Patreon and Floatplane, because without your help, none of any of this stuff would work. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week.